Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as I want to continue on the conversation about tonight's matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and Baltimore Ravens, but I want to look at it from an angle of fantasy football because obviously 'tis the season now and a lot of leagues are, ramping up now, obviously, at this point. And I want to talk about what differences we could see from the skill position groups from both the Chiefs and the Ravens this season in comparison to what we saw last year. And I believe the most interesting fantasy football conversation for this game is what is the usage of Lamar Jackson versus Derrick Henry in the rushing game going to look like in the red zone. I think at least for this game, the Ravens are going to try and show off their new weapon in Derrick Henry, and I think that he will get these goal line touches, if anything, at least for the idea that the Ravens can put on film for opposing teams that they have multiple threats in the red zone. In years past, Lamar Jackson has done the heavy lifting in the running game, even though we have seen other running backs pop up for them, of course. But I think that now with this investment into a bruising back, which is really a new development for this Ravens team specifically, that I think that they will, again, try and prioritize getting Derrick Henry looks in order to, one, sort of work his way into the offense and build some confidence there, but also, again, just to show opposing teams that they have to prepare for multiple different outcomes, which could, again, just sort of give defensive coordinators a little bit less rest, I should say, knowing that there are multiple ways that the Ravens can hurt you in the running game. So I think that Derrick Henry is an excellent play for tonight. And generally speaking here as well, I think that outside of the red zone alone, I'm expecting the Ravens to come out with making the run game a priority. Last year when we saw these two teams in the AFC Championship game, the Chiefs were the number 2 scoring defense in the league during the regular season, but if there was any area they were susceptible, it was in the run game. They were 17th in rush yards allowed per game last year. The Ravens didn't really take advantage of that at all. They sort of insisted to go through the passing game. I'm not sure what the thought process behind it was. Maybe it was to give Lamar Jackson his sort of playoff moment that we've all been anxiously waiting for. But Ravens ran the ball just 16 times, and Lamar Jackson was half of the rush attempts. Part of that conversation as well is maybe the fact that they just didn't feel all that comfortable with the running backs that they had. It was Gus Edwards and Justice Hill that they were honestly more impactful, in my opinion, in the passing game than anything that they got done on the ground in that game. But that being said, I think that was an area they probably should have tried working a little bit harder there. And ultimately, I think that that's probably something that Todd Monken, the Ravens offensive coordinator, has been losing sleep about a little bit over the course of the past handful of months since that game. And I think that now with a weapon like Derrick Henry, they are going to try and just run down the Chiefs' throats and see if they can just sort of fatigue out that defense that, again, is very good, but did see a key loss in Willie Gay as well and L'Jarius Sneed on the perimeter that I feel like they're going to try and establish this game and their overall identity in the trenches. Now, the Ravens did lose a couple starting offensive linemen, which could be a little bit of a concern as well, so we have to at least acknowledge that. But I think that this is the direction that the Ravens are going to try and invest into this upcoming season. And I just believe that with two runners as talented as Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, they are going to find a way to have success. So that being said, when you're talking about Lamar Jackson, and even if he does lose those red zone possessions, or at least a portion of them, what type of option will he be for a fantasy quarterback? I think he's going to be just fine. And I think, driving up and down the field, Lamar on any drop back alone is a threat to run. So you take that as well as the fact that there are opportunities to be had as well in the designed run game. Is that where I expect Todd Monken in this offense to go? Probably not, but I also think that part of it as well is they are going to try and limit the amount of hits that Lamar takes slightly, which could possibly mean that the passing game could take on a little bit more prominence as well. And for their skill position players, from a fantasy football perspective, the majority of the attention is on Zay Flowers and the combinations of tight ends that they have in Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. I feel like for this game tonight, that Zay Flowers could be an excellent option. Like we just mentioned, Chiefs lost their number one cornerback in Snead from last season. That in itself sort of could open up more opportunities for Zay Flowers, but I think that the lowest moment of Zay Flowers' rookie season probably came in that AFC Championship game when he fumbled into the end zone and out of bounds that went from scoring a touchdown or at least being on the 1 yard line to punch in a touchdown and instead resulted in a turnover that, again, he is probably thought about on repeat since that occurred, at least to some degree. So I think that the Ravens are going to try and establish some confidence with Zay Flowers in this game, let him get his get back a little bit, and try and, I wouldn't say force feed by any means, because I do think at the end of the day, this is going to be a team that tries to run the ball more than pass, but I think that Zay Flowers is going to get his opportunities to shine as well, and he is a very promising young player. I am a little bit skeptical about the tight ends for the Ravens. Last season with Mark Andrews getting injured, Isaiah Likely was able to emerge and ultimately was a very nice option for them. And I was also surprised as of this morning to look into the fact that Mark Andrews is still just 28 years old. So at first I was sort of running through scenarios in my head of, well, could the Ravens try and establish Isaiah Likely a little bit more if they know that Mark Andrews could be on his way out? But again, Andrews still just 28 years old. Both of the two players with 2 years left on their current deals. So it's not like the Ravens would totally benefit from the idea of kind of pushing Mark Andrews to the side and trying to establish this future with Isaiah Likely. At the end of the day, this season is about winning for the Ravens. That is all they care about. They are not trying to worry about the future development of players like Isaiah Likely. So I think that Likely is going to be a part of the Ravens game plan, which is very fair, but I think him and Andrews are going to split looks a little bit from that tight end possession. I do think that tight ends will be prominent at using the tight ends as well to their game if they are able to build up the run game like I'm anticipating. I think play action passes could be a massive part of their offense as well, and I think that that's where we could start to see as well the likes of Likely and Andrews. But like we talked about earlier, this is going to be a team that in the red zone, it's going to be very difficult to stop them in the run game. Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely are both excellent red zone threats, so there is that. I just worry a little bit about how they're going to be able to both get their share of consistent targets. So for fantasy owners, I understand both of them, very nice players, but I do worry a little bit about the overall share of targets for the two of them. And Anthony Manzano has a question about, does Baltimore have enough cap room with the massive amount of cap that Lamar's deal takes up? Honestly, Lamar's contract isn't even all that bad in comparison to what a lot of these quarterback contracts that have come off the table this offseason are, with Jared Goff making over $50 million, Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa. So I think that Baltimore has more than enough room. I also think that they've been one of the best development teams of the past handful of years all of those names we just mentioned as well, in Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, those are all homegrown talents, along with the fact that Lamar Jackson has come miles as a passer from where he was coming out of Louisville. So yeah, Lamar, for most teams, if you have a good quarterback, it's going to take up a lot of cap space for you. But I think that the Ravens are more than capable enough to continue. And by the way, on that whole note of development, I give a lot of credit as well to Harbaugh to be able to, have that flexibility of adding cheaper rookie contracts along with that can still give you production alongside Lamar Jackson. And additionally, to your question about conference champions and division winners, we're going to be covering that in the next segment. So see you there, but we will get to that momentarily. On the other side of this particular matchup in regards to fantasy football implications, on the Chiefs side of this, I think there are a lot of questions about what this next generation or next few years for the Chiefs are going to look like once Travis Kelce is no longer Travis Kelce. And we saw somewhat of regression, at least in terms of production from Kelce last year. He saw his lowest amount of targets since 2016 and his lowest yards total since 2015. So in both of those cases, I believe that ultimately, I just think during the regular season at this point with Travis Kelce entering his age 35 season, I think he's kind of going to save himself a little bit. And it's not just the fact that he's 35 years old. It's that he's 35 years old coming off of back-to-back runs to the Super Bowl. So add on an additional month and a half or so of season every year for Travis Kelce. So I still think that if you drafted Travis Kelce, you shouldn't be panicked whatsoever, and you're not going to find a better option than him. I just don't think he is going to be the perennial number one fantasy tight end from here on out that he was for so many years. And ultimately, you can't write him off because he has continued to produce 100%, and the playoffs showed that with over 350, I think it was 335 or 350 yards, something along those lines, and a few touchdowns to that mix as well. But yeah, as well as Anthony says, Travis Kelce fan, I feel that the lack of trust from Patrick Mahomes for the other receiver's ability to catch the ball in critical moments is the reason why he uses Travis. Absolutely fair. And I think that anytime the Chiefs are, in the fourth quarter, in a pinch, looking for somebody to make a play, Mahomes is always going to look for Kelce. So again, I'm not trying to tear down his fantasy value. He's going to be in that upper echelon of group. I just think that with a lot of these younger tight ends as well coming into the picture, I think that we're going to see Kelce slow down his regular season production slightly. Last year was dealing with some injuries. And again, I think he's going to be totally fine in terms of when it ultimately matters for the Chiefs in the playoffs. Travis Kelce will be there, no problem, the all-time receptions leader in the NFL postseason. But that being said, regular season production, I do have some reservations with, just based off of the need as a whole. But again, when we're talking what does this look like for the Chiefs, if it's not going to be Travis Kelce, who is it going to be? Well, I think that the Chiefs would love to establish more of a prominent running game. I think that Isaiah Pacheco has shown a ton of promise these past couple years. He's one of my favorite running backs in the league. Obviously, the way that he runs with that anger and ferocity is, how can you not love that as a football fan? But I ultimately think that that Pacheco is in for a big season. That's a good offensive line in front of him as well. And the fact that you have Patrick Mahomes now with a couple deep threats in Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown, that defenses aren't going to be able to play so close to the line of scrimmage, that they will have to respect the deep passing game, which truthfully, with Kadarius Toney and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I don't know if that was really the case last season. So I think there are going to be opportunities for Pacheco to become a monster for them. On the note of the receivers, I'm a lot more skeptical, I think, ultimately about the year one production of Xavier Worthy. I understand he does have the explosive upside, like I just mentioned. I just feel like we could definitely be looking at a season where Xavier Worthy is a little bit of a week-to-week basis in terms of hit or miss. And he will have his good moments, in my opinion. I'm not worried about that for him. I just don't know how much I would really rely on him as a receiver 1 or 2 from a fantasy football perspective. He can be a good flex option on a handful of occasions. I don't think that he is for this week in particular, with a talented secondary in Baltimore. And then Hollywood Brown as well is probably, he's even lower than Xavier Worthy is on a lot of people's lists. And I just don't know if I love any of the matchups necessarily for the Chiefs for tonight's game. If anybody were to show themselves from a fantasy standpoint, Rashee Rice, I know obviously all of the off-the-field stuff and the legal troubles that he's gotten into, but now we're just talking about football here. He's not going to be suspended. He's going to be available, and I'm sure the Chiefs are probably keeping that in the back of their mind that they could potentially lose Rice at some point with a suspension that probably won't take place, it sounds like, until next season. So ultimately, we'll have to see there. But again, the sort of must plays from this game, I think, are going to be both of the quarterbacks in Lamar and Patrick Mahomes, Derrick Henry, and Travis Kelce. Outside of that, you have some flex options. Again, really like the idea of Zay Flowers and Xavier Worthy. A lot more middling on, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. But we're now going to get into my full list of predictions for this upcoming season. For the regular season, we'll be talking about all of the record predictions for all 32 NFL teams and what the playoff picture looks like. So we will dive into all of that, but first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.